Hi. Thanks so much for joining us today for another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. My name is Bridget Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Jeff Selingo, joining you from Washington, D.C., where I'm an author, a journalist, and a special advisor at Arizona State University.
And each week we bring you a short, uplifting interview with a current college president or chancellor who is navigating the complexity of this moment. And we hope to distill from them insights, advice, and just recommendations for them about how to navigate this week, how they're leading in this moment. And we hope to leave you with a bit of inspiration and hope for the week ahead.
And Bridget, I think we're really delighted with today's guest because we have with us Freeman Hrabowski, who many people in higher ed and around higher ed knows as the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, which of course really rose to some prominence a couple of years ago because of their big win in the March Madness tournament. But we all know in higher ed, there's so much more to UMBC than basketball, and Freeman, I think, will talk a little bit about it today. He's been president there for 28 years, is a legend in higher ed, receiving many accolades, including being listed as one of the 10 best college presidents by Time Magazine, also author of a new book called The Empowered University. So Freeman, great to have you with us today. You've not only been one of the longest serving leaders in higher ed, but you're also a prominent face in the civil rights movement, Spike Lee's film Four Little Girls. So given the global pandemic and the fight for racial justice in the U.S. After the murder of George Floyd a couple of weeks ago, I know many people are looking to you for leadership during such a challenging time. So how are you holding up right now? What's on your mind?
Thank you. First of all, thank you both. You are both admired leaders in higher education. So it's great to be here talking with you. I'm holding up well. My students give me strength and inspiration every day. It is a challenging time, and I'm glad you brought up both those issues of the COVID challenge and the challenges we face regarding structural racism. I would add a third, and that is the problems with the economy, and particularly for people who are not from the wealthiest of homes or who are not as privileged. All three of those come together. And what I would say to you is that I am saying to my students and my colleagues, and we're saying at UMBC, this is the time that sheds light on our character as a country and as leaders, as educators, as universities. And we are determined at UMBC to act with authenticity and to be honest with ourselves, to say we can be better at whatever we're doing. And we want to show our students how to lead with, I would say, with not just authenticity, but with the kind of humility that suggests to people we can do this. We can do this. I can talk forever, but I think you may want to ask me questions.
No, we have many questions.
Yeah, sure. So that is a bit of an answer, I think, to this next question, but I'm hoping you can go a little bit further because, I'm seeing there are interim leaders in this moment. There are folks who are in the midst of transition. And so I sit in this kind of central space and observe how university presidents and chancellors are responding, how they're communicating in this moment. And I think as someone who served for 28 years, I'm hoping you can give them advice about how to lead in this moment. Exactly what kind of framework do you think, as a leader of an institution serving thousands of students, that you would suggest that they incorporate, especially for those who might be in the interim or the new capacity?
I always say something that surprises people, and it's at the beginning of this new book on the Empowered University, that it's not about me, it's about us. It's right now, there's no doubt the buck stops with me. When it doesn't go well, people are writing to me. What did you not do, for example? But when it goes well because of so many people who are working together. And for people who've not been in the job for long, or who have been in there for long and who may be feeling somewhat discouraged, I think it's important to think about the importance of community, of the people around you, of student leaders, faculty leaders, staff leaders. What gives me encouragement, besides my students, is when I look at my colleagues, staff and faculty, who are working so hard to help our students and thinking about how we do it. It's not just reaching the goal line. It is about how we get there. And that means showing people that in stressful times, we need to think about being supportive of each other, to keep a kind of calmness, to bring honesty to the work, but to be able to say things in a way that we can hear each other. We talk about retriever courage at UMBC. Our dog, the Chesapeake Bay Retriever, and that's the courage to look in the mirror and not only to be honest with self, but to listen to the other voices, whether it's about the fears that people have about this disease right now, or it's about the challenges involving racism. The question is, how can we show, not only through what we say, but through our actions, that we are committed to making the place better, to addressing the issues and concerns that people bring up, and most important, that we have a vision that tomorrow can be better than today. It's so easy to go down, down, down in that hole because of all the problems we're having, but we have had problems before. Racism is not new. We've had diseases before, and you can talk about ways in which they are the same and ways in which they're different, but what makes the difference will be our attitudes, not only as leaders, but as people who are serving other people. And that's what gets me through every day, from thinking back over the past 50 years of my career, seeing how people have been able to inspire us even when the times were dark. It's very important. Hope, Jesse Jackson's statement, keep hope alive. It is so true. It is so true. We must keep hope and belief in this next generation.
So, Freeman, is there something that from earlier in your presidency or earlier in your life or career that really kind of drives you right now, and something, is there a leadership lesson that you pull from either earlier in your life or earlier in your career that
Sure.
kind of helps you through this moment?
Sure. There's no doubt that growing up as a Black child in Birmingham and marching with Dr. King and spending a week in jail, all those things were as awful as they could possibly be, and yet as empowering as they could possibly be. Because that statement I made about tomorrow can be better than today, that theme came from listening to Dr. King. And I did see things improve. We have a long way to go, but my God, I did see so much progress over a number of years. And then my first year at UMBC, before I became president, and within the first few days there, in 1987, we had a Black student protest, and it was a very difficult time. And yet at that period, Michael Hooker, the president, and my colleagues and I worked with students, listening to them, trying to understand their perspective. And we learned a lot, and we made changes based on what we heard. And then we've had other situations since then. Every campus goes through this. Every president knows what I'm talking about. I say in that book, there's a protest around the corner. And the question is, how do we deal with it? And one part of what we learned, what I learned as a child, what I learned as a young administrator, was that, first of all, when we see these protests, they are part of our democracy, a very important part of our democracy, when people feel empowered to say what they really believe. Number two, that we only get better as we face the truth, the good, the bad, and the challenging. And then as we work on implementation. And that, now I'm going to go back and forth between talking about the issues involving every day right now and what we see on TV and the protests, but on the other side, looking at COVID-19 and the challenges of preparing for the fall. In both cases, the fact is that the more we can hear the voices of people and bring those voices to the table, and the more we listen to experts, in every case, listening to experts and letting reason prevail, the better off we are the next day. And the more we get knocked down, as we get knocked down by health or by these other challenges, and we get back up, the stronger we can be. And that's probably the most important lesson. In the Black community, there's a phrase in church that says, we fall down, but we get up. And we use the word at UMBC, grit. We see that word grit, that hard work, that resilience, and never giving up. Now is the time we in America, in the world, and at UMBC must use that word and show it through our actions. Grit. It's very important.
Love it. So I'm curious about what you think is going to change about higher education as a result of this moment. I think there are a couple ways you could go with that question. I'd love to know what you think is going to happen, but also what you hope will happen.
And I want to start with what I hope. And I hope that we will take this time in America to listen to these voices who've not been heard, number one, and to look at both democracy and voting because the American higher education is directly tied to just that, to democracy and to voting and to bringing into positions of power people who believe in higher education, people who believe in science and believe in the humanities. And we have a role to play. We can be empowered and help Americans more than ever. There's an initiative called Imagining America, where my arts and humanities colleagues work with people from Syracuse to all kinds of campuses on looking at ways that the humanists and the artists can help change communities, urban communities and others. Well, we should be seeing much more of that. We can play a role with all of that. And secondly, when we think about the health challenges that we face, again, there are several things. I've just finished writing an article with my colleagues on this shortage of people from diverse backgrounds in the scientific discussions. And the need to bring more, something that our campus has worked a lot on, more people into the scientific enterprise so that they can bring those perspectives, looking at the disproportionate numbers of people of color, of African Americans and Latinos who are contracting the disease and actually dying. And so while they're talking about bringing people into public health, into medicine, into science, into policy, I'm thinking this is the time when American higher education, I'm hoping, but I believe it will happen, understands that our strength as a country will be inextricably tied to our success in bringing people from all backgrounds into the problem solving as we face the future.
Freeman, your enthusiasm and optimism always amazes me, even in the darkest. Well, I see as some of the darkest moments, and I'm only late 40s, so you've seen a lot more of the world than I have. But what really drives this optimism and purpose right now for you? Because when I talk to university leaders, they're really worried, right? They're not only worried about the pandemic and coming back to campus, and are they going to be able to bring back students to campus, and all the financial and health pieces of that, but everybody's worried about what they describe as campus is going to be like a tinderbox this fall, because the protests that we've seen in our cities and across the country are going to come to our campuses. They know that, right? Yes. So you're going to be dealing with all this all at the same time, and most of the people I'm talking to are not. They're hopeful, but they're not very positive right now. So,
it's a great question, and I am as realistic as the next. People say we must not be being realistic. I'm so realistic that every day I am challenged as I look into when I go into the city of Baltimore or DC, and I see poor children and their families are struggling like this every day. Those of us in higher education who are presidents or part of the professoriate are very privileged. And we have not had this level of struggle before. But poor people of all races and Black people in cities and poor whites struggle every day. Children struggle seeing other children killed every day in our country. And so families struggle without having health care. And from my perspective, I think this is a time when we have the chance to become more enlightened and more sensitive to what so many human beings, Americans and then in other countries also, go through every day. The things that we're dealing with, the uncertainty, the illness issues, the racial tension issues, the economic issues. And this is all a part of life. And I think the more enlightened we become as a society, the more we'll understand it's not just about us. It's not just about a president or about the university or at any level. It's about all of us. And it's not just about those of us who are privileged, because while some are saying, oh, things have never been this bad. Well, go and look. It's like when Katrina hit, and all of a sudden people saw the poverty in New Orleans, but those poor people have been going through that every day. And so this is a time when the light is shining on the human condition, and it's showing those of us of privilege what other people have gone through all along. And so going back to something Bridget asked me about what I hope for, it is that we can help our students and our colleagues understand we should be preparing people to pay it forward, to want children of all backgrounds to feel they matter, to make sure Blacks matter and other groups matter, and most important, to put ourselves in the shoes of other people. It seems to me that's at the essence of what it means to be educated, to be constantly asking questions, trying to learn new things. And what could be more important than learning how others are experiencing life? And this is giving us a chance to do that. And when you've gone through what certain groups like African Americans, just start with us, right now, people are talking about Black people, and we had gotten away from doing that as much. You know that we talk minority, and that's fine, but it's good to bring specificity. There's a time to talk about every group. There's no doubt about that, from gender to LGBTQ to Asian Americans to Latinas, the Latinx to African, to all of us. We need all those conversations. This very moment, we are seeing so many Blacks killed through police brutality, and that people are taking the time to say anti-Black racism. That is not to the exclusion of other groups, but it is saying, let's take a moment and see what's happened in this country. And so I think back to how bad things were for me as a colored child, not called Black, then colored child in Birmingham. It's hard for a white to understand how we felt when our little friends, little girls, were blown up in the church. And we had nightmares and still have nightmares. And I don't say that for pity. It is to say that people have no idea what people have gone through for years. And I think this is what we're seeing right now. And so with all that said, it may sound as if I'm bitter. I am not. My faith keeps me strong. And I know we made progress from the 50s and 60s up until a period. We are now seeing some real problems. But this is the human condition. We make progress. We slide back some. We learn things and we move ahead. I have confidence that we as human beings and we as Americans will say enough is enough. We're better than this. That's what gives me hope. I truly believe at every level, we've been able to say we're better than this and we make progress. That's the hope for me.
That's great. And I think your perspective, your wide perspective helps. Sometimes I think presidents get too deep into their own lives, into their own institutions, their heads down in the work rather than looking out and beyond. Right, Bridget?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, as you are leading so clearly in this moment. And so I'm so glad that we're able to share your leadership with others, because I know that's not always the case. Not every institutional leader has a clear sense of how to move forward in this moment and be able to keep folks inspired. And part of that, I think, is the design of the job. So I would love to just turn our head a little bit towards that, and that, I have a sense of just how inundated you are on a daily basis. The amount of requests, the amount of just inputs and demands, and needing to make decisions and constantly facing possibility of surprise. Right. And I'm just wondering how you would suggest to others, and I want to view into how you go about this job. How do you keep your head focused on the challenge of the day, as opposed to being caught up in the whatever is going to be a distraction of the moment? Sure. And now there's plenty of things right now that are not a distraction. They need to be dealt with. But I'm just curious about how you differentiate and make those kinds of decisions.
I always say to presidents, it's so important to take care of self and one's health, because the stress is enormous. It's just great. It really is. And that means the health. So I've got some of the people in my president's office, and I compare notes on our exercise every day. That may sound frivolous, but it's so important. I'm getting my steps in. I'm getting 6-7 miles in a day, mainly walking, a little running with it, but we're working on it. But they will tell me about their biking and other things. And to do that, which is not the job, but it is the job. It is making sure colleagues are working on health, emotional and physical health. It's very important. I mean, if you don't have your health, it's hard to do other things. And then number two, having good people whom you can trust around you, and who will tell you the truth and tell you when what you're saying does not make sense, or when it needs rethinking, or when you're being too irritable, or when you need to be more positive, because you're seeing the positive side now. Believe me, there are times when Freeman is a little irritable. And it's great to have people who can help bring humor into all of this. And then having a structured approach to saying, what are the most critical issues we're facing right now? There is no doubt that we are focused on COVID and safety and health, making sure faculty, staff, and students, not the students, but faculty and staff are healthy, and then therefore balancing online versus in person and what we'll do there. Number two, we are all looking at MSNBC or other stations right now and realizing protests are all around us, and our students are writing to us, because with all of our success in producing Black scientists and being one of these leading predominantly white schools in graduation rates and things for African Americans and others. The fact is that we have our challenges also. Any president of the university in America should be honest enough to say that his or her campus still has challenges. And as my colleagues, as my students write to me, particularly alumni, and I say, but we had these problems in this department, the first thing to do is not be defensive. Number two, thank them for the courage. And number three, listen carefully. That's that retrieval courage to what they're saying. And number four, think about next steps so that you're not just giving platitudes, but you're talking about things that can be done. For example, helping Americans of all types understand the challenges that we're facing right now. So the idea of focusing on the COVID issues, on these race issues, and then on the budgetary issues, because the budgetary issues are just as critical as anything else, quite frankly, even more critical. And for us, we keep talking about guiding principles of the academic program first and people at the same time, that we're trying to support people so that we can have as much job security as possible as we think about what we cannot do in the future, for example, what we must do, but on a multi-year level. So budgetary, health, and these challenges, those are the three big things. Other things are more routine that we work on. And finally, perhaps more significant than any of them, beyond physical health, beyond the particular issues, is working to set a tone that says to my colleagues, we are in this together. We're working very closely with Jay Perman, who's the chancellor of our University System of Maryland. We're meeting 2 or 3 times a week, and we encourage each other. He has that positive attitude also, but being able with each group, when we meet with our faculty groups, staff groups, and student leaders, to say, we can get through this. Tell us what you're thinking. Listen to what we're thinking about. We're in this thing together, and that we will make it. I can't say that enough. We will make it. Anytime people go through challenges and succeed, you will find a theme of positive can-do attitude. And that goes all the way to life and death. I have the honor of working with students and colleagues every year who have cancer. And I say the honor. It is such a challenge for them, but to have them wanting me to go through it with them. And I'm telling you, I've seen it over and over again with my 17-year-olds to my colleagues, that when they have that positive attitude as they work with the physician, the results tend to be much better than when they just kind of give up or just focus only on the negative. That does not pull you up. So my job is to work with my colleagues to elevate us and to be elevated by them. Long answer.
Great, Freeman. This has been a great time together. So one last question. A lot of hot takes right now about the future of higher education. What from this moment, and there's a lot of things going on in this moment, might stick for the long term? What do you see in how institutions are being really innovative in this moment?
Yes.
What do you see sticking?
Sure. It will be the thought that we are not simply longing for the good old days. We have a tendency to romanticize the way we've always done things. I have always said, particularly when talking about success in science and engineering, that we need to rethink. My TED Talk talks about that, how we change the culture, the pillars of success. And it has to do with high expectations, higher than we have right now, to believing more people can succeed. And that means everything from using technology more effectively, to not thinking that simply without technology and face-to-face is always superior, to thinking that we're going to have more hybrid approaches to the work itself, to thinking we're thinking about different ways of assessing the work that we're doing, to building community both on campus and through technology. That community is more important than ever, and creating a culture that continues to ask good questions and to not simply complain or say, oh, how bad things are, because that doesn't get you anywhere. It's important to be realistic and to say, yeah, these are our challenges. Just as it's important to say, this is the protest. But after the stating of the challenge, after the protest, then what? And in American higher education, that's where we are right now. That we, right now on my campus, faculty are working on workshops to make their work with technology even more effective. Even as we work with children in Baltimore City, there will be more, I would say there would be stronger teaching and learning as a result of more people realizing we can be much better than we are. That's the message I want to send, that American higher education does some wonderful things. And yet we want to be secure enough to say we can be much better.
I feel like that's the most perfect note to end on. We're so grateful for your leadership historically in higher ed, but especially in this moment, and your willingness to inspire others. I think for those of you who are watching at home, obviously leadership matters so much right now. And we know that higher education leaders in particular are having a moment where we want to shine a spotlight on those that are truly doing an exemplary job. And President Hrabowski, you are, and you have been for so long, ever since I first met you 7-8 years ago, you have been inspiring and helping in ways that you could never fully understand. So thank you for this. And for those of you who are watching at home, we are grateful for you spending this time with us. Again, we hope this gives you some inspiration and some hope for the week ahead. Next week, we will be sitting down with Chancellor Harold Martin from North Carolina A&T, and we are very much looking forward to that conversation. So we'll see you next Monday, back here, same time, same location. And thank you again, and everyone have a wonderful week ahead.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
Thanks, everybody.